Welcome to the Chap Chat. I am John Denny, the full-time support chaplain for South Carolina National Guard, and we have the privilege of having Captain Lisa Allen with us from our Air Guard counterpart. And thank you for being here. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I heard you talking just a minute ago to Chelsea. Chelsea's right across from us. And you were saying that you were in the Navy for 11 years.
Yes, sir. So I started off, I was a direct commission into the Navy Reserves. And from there, I transitioned into the Air Guard in 2022.
Okay. And you were PAO, Public Affairs, in the Navy.
Yes, sir.
So why did you decide to go from Navy to Air Guard? What was it about the Air Guard that intrigued you?
So when I was in the Navy, most of the units that I worked with for public affairs were all up and down the East Coast. So I didn't have any that were right there in my backyard. And so having a family and a full-time job and managing those responsibilities at times got really challenging because I had to travel to my units to do my public affairs drill work. And there was not great integration with the reserve component and the active component. And so a lot of that time spent away from my family and my full-time job was not actively working in public affairs.
Okay.
So I wanted to find something where I could actually hone my public affairs skills and be of value and service. And so when I moved to Sumter and was working with the 20th Fighter Wing Public Affairs Office as a civilian, I learned about the Air Guard, and so I started talking to the leadership over at McIntyre and found out that they had an opening, and so I started pursuing my transition.
Okay, great. And for those that don't know, can you explain what public affairs is and what they do?
Sure. So public affairs is the communications hub of the military. So each public affairs office, depending on where it is in the structure, the organizational structure, serve different purposes. But for the purpose of this conversation, for wing level public affairs, what we do out at McIntyre is we provide information not only internally but externally about everything that's going on within the wing, whether it's training, whether it's personnel, whether it's just things happening at the base. Maybe there's a closure at one of the gates or one of the services is down. That's all the things that we want to communicate, as well as changes that are going on. If there's new officers coming in, promotions, retirements, all the great things. So we do photography, we do videography, we do podcasts.
Right.
I'm usually on the opposite side of this.
Yep. So you get a chance to see what it feels like.
I definitely do.
Yep.
And so we do all of that, as well as portrait photography and things like that, and then getting out into the community and sharing with the community what we do.
Okay. So what's the most rewarding thing that you do as a PAO? What's the one thing that you're like, man, if I could just do this all the time, I would feel good about myself?
I think on a production level, probably my favorite thing is getting out into the community.
Yeah.
I love being able to share what the Guard does with the community, and just helping them better understand what we're about and what we do. I always tell people that the Guard and the Air Guard, no offense, Army, but the Air Guard doesn't get a lot of love in South Carolina. And I tell people that it's like one of the best kept secrets.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Because of the different ways you can serve and how you can really make it work for you and be what you want it to be.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun when I get to talk to high schoolers and even young adults about this as an option for their life that they may not have even realized because they are just familiar with reserves and active duty.
Right. So if someone was on the fence, right? So Army, I think most people have an idea of what Army is. There's a wide variety of MOSs, jobs, within the Guard, anywhere from generator mechanic, cook, infantry, engineer, horizontal, vertical, so you can make roads, you can build airports, all kinds of stuff. But I got the feeling that the Air Guard, and no offense, Army, is more on the technical. there's a lot of technical expertise as far as electronics, as far as avionics. And granted, we have some of that on the Army side, some love to our aviation folks on the Army side. But what are the differentiators that someone would come to the Air Guard for versus the Army?
I think you really hit the nail on the head with the differentiators being more about the technical side. We don't have, obviously, being air, we don't have a lot of the ground component things. And there is a lot of technical stuff that does go into the ground component stuff as well. So I think really a reason I think people would sway more towards air versus Army is that ground air piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we always kind of label it the sexiness of our aircraft, our jets, our heavies. Any of the air components that we do have, we've got everything from, our fighters to our bombers to our heavy aircraft, our transport aircraft, all the way to helos that do a variety of missions. So if that's really what you are interested in that air component, that I think tends to be what people look at with the air side. Whereas the Army has more diversity, I think, when it comes to all of the things that you can possibly learn and explore.
Gotcha. That's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But your current job, what you're doing for us, I could see how there's some community relations with it, so there's some carryover. But if you wouldn't mind, can you share what your current job description is and what you're doing? Because it really is an important part of what the Guard does.
It is. So I am currently working as the State Partnership Program Director for the South Carolina National Guard. So what that means is every Guard has a state partner, which is a partner nation, and together with those partner nations, we work to provide military-to-military support, civilian-to-military support, and a combination thereof. For South Carolina, our partner nation is Colombia in South America. I always have to distinguish that because people hear Colombia and they think that it's Colombia, South Carolina.
Yeah, we're going 0.3 miles to do our mission.
Right now, we're going a little bit further than that. And so what we focus on right now is the mill-to-mill support, the military-to-military support within Colombia. We are working to expand our program into the civilian support as well as education support opportunities. But our focus really for the 12 years that we've been partners is the military-to-military support. And that's both on the Army and the Air Force side. So, for instance, we have engagements where some of their military members will come here and they will work and train hand in hand with our Army counterparts that match whatever it is career field-wise that they're doing. And they will go back and they'll take some of what they've learned, and also our folks can take some of what they've learned from the Colombians and employ it in their day-to-day activities. And so the intent is to obviously build that team and that camaraderie between all of the different units, but it's also to increase readiness for the Colombian Army to look at their scope of what their military does, which is a little bit different than what we do. When they talk about deployments, they're talking about deploying in country,
right,
and defending their country, their borders, their freedoms, their safety. And so, our deployments are similar in theory, but we're going to other countries to help defend those countries as well as our own freedoms.
Right.
So that's what we do as a program.
Wow. And I can't imagine, and Colombia's been at war now internally for over 20 years, right?
Yes.
So it's one thing, right, to be able to get up, leave your family, go deploy for 10 months, like 11 months, or if you're in the Air Guard, how long?
Our deployments range. We've just started a different deployment cycle, so it tends to be about 6-month deployment cycles. Okay,
about 6 months versus waking up, putting on your boots, walking out the door, and that's your battleground.
It is.
That's got to be a very different dynamic. So when you go there, and I'm assuming you go quite often.
Yeah, so far. So I've been in this position now since September, and I've made about 3 different trips down there.
Okay. Where's the go-to place to eat? Like, you go there, you're like, I got to go back to Rosalita's or whatever. I don't know. And what's your go-to food?
Oh, goodness. The name escapes me.
Not Rosalita's?
It is not Rosalita's, but that was good. But it is it's almost hard to explain. It's almost like a nightclub-ish feel, but it's a multi-level. It's a steak house, essentially. But they've got all of the traditional Colombian dishes as well as your steaks, salad, just anything you can imagine. But each level has different themes. They've got music, they've got dancing, they've got all sorts of entertainment. So it's just a really neat way to immerse yourself in the Colombian culture and have a great meal at the same time.
Oh, that's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. So transitioning just a bit, with your travel schedule, your drill schedule, your work schedule, and oh yeah, by the way, you've got family at home also. What do you do to help you stay balanced?
So one of the biggest things that I have learned recently is that keeping calendars is the only way that I'm going to keep my head above water with everything that we have going on. So I've got a variety of different calendars, but I merge them all into an old traditional paper planner that I keep open on my desk at all times. But my family shares an electronic calendar through our phones so that we can always add things and know what's going on. So that's one way, is just keeping everybody in the know about what's going on. But as far as myself, you said staying grounded, right?
Balanced, grounded, whatever you wanted to call it. Yeah.
I think the key for me is taking advantage of my drive time. So I live in Sumter, so it's about an hour commute-ish. So I take advantage of that time to listen to podcasts, audiobooks. I'm doing the Bible in a Year podcast right now, so I'll catch up on some of those during my drives. And just really, I really try, if I can, to not take work calls while I'm driving, so that I can use that just as a time for me to either get ready for the day as I'm driving in, or kind of decompress and get ready to enjoy my evening with my family.
Gotcha. That's good. And I had heard you say that you're listening to Bible in a Year, and that's part of the reason for this podcast, is to really help me understand how people's faith or spiritual practices fill them, keep them centered, and give them some purpose. So if you're okay sharing, what does your faith mean to you?
Wow. So
you can pretend like I'm not a chaplain. I'm just some dude asking you a question.
Yeah. So I've had a very interesting faith journey. I grew up Catholic, and when I was in college, I went to a Catholic university. I was extremely involved there with all of the, that was when I got confirmed. And then from there, I started teaching catechism classes to my peers through an adult catechism class. And then when I graduated from college and I started my adult life, moving around, things like that, I sort of walked away from the Catholic Church, but I always maintained a faith. So I went to a lot of different non-denominational churches, which I enjoyed, and they filled me up, and there were a lot of different things that I took away from that I learned from. But I've always felt home is in the Catholic Church. When I would go back to church, it just felt like the place that I belonged.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that anything is a coincidence. And over the past 5 months, there have just been little hints along the way that I needed to start getting back into it. And I followed those hints and started going back to church. So I've come back to the Catholic Church. And I absolutely love just being there and feeling the peace and feeling God's presence in my life, and watching him work in the lives of the people that I love. And even, people that I may not know well, hearing their own stories and being able to relate and understand the different walks that we all go through.
Right. That's good stuff. And tell me about some of those hints, because I got to believe that there are some people out there that, regardless of what they believe, right? I think that at some point we all have to pull strength from something or somewhere. Mm-hmm. Christianity, Catholicism, that's one way. But I think that throughout our life, we all feel that there's hints, there's tugging, there's something. But what made you listen to those hints versus just moving on from them?
Sure. So my first hint, I had explored several different churches in the Sumter area, and they were all great in their own way, but there was never one that was just like, ooh, I need to be here. I want to do this. I want to be here. And so back in, I want to say it was November-ish timeframe, one of the leaders at McIntyre had his children baptized. And I was like, oh, how neat, And so I ended up going. PA was covering it for him, and I ended up just going to be there to help out, carry equipment, whatever. And I didn't realize that it was going to be a Catholic baptism. Mm. So that was the first thing that just kind of hit me, and I was like, wow, okay, interesting.
Familiar.
Here I am.
Yeah.
And then about 2 weeks later, I was back in Colombia for a planning conference, and we went up to Montserrat, which is a monastery there, a Catholic monastery there. And again, it was one of those things like, okay, here we are. And I went in and I prayed, and one of the things that I prayed was, hey, look, God, you're putting this stuff in front of me. I've been longing. I've been looking for something. Talk to me, tell me, lead me to where I need to be. And really, it was when I came home from that trip, the next weekend, I just said, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm just going to go, because it was the one church I hadn't gone to. So I'm going to go. This seems to be something that's going on. Let's see if there's something to it.
Sure.
And I went, and the only reason I've missed since is because of drill weekends. So
what is it about the Catholic Church for you that feels like home? And could have been your upbringing, Catholic college you went to? What is it that fills your soul about the Catholic Church? So
I really didn't get too overly involved, other than the traditional sacraments and things like that when I was younger. I did participate in like the choir for Christmas and things like that. But other than that, I wasn't overly involved in what was going on. When I did go to college, like I said, I did get much more involved. My college was in San Antonio, Texas. My parents would drive on the weekends and go to church with me. So it really became a family thing for the three of us. My two older sisters were out of the house already, and so it was the three of us, and that was our time together. And my parents got really involved in the community there as well. And so I feel like a lot of the peace that I find now as an adult within the Catholic Church brings those memories back of having that time with my parents and really growing in my own faith during that time, but also watching my parents be involved and growing in their own faith. And it brings a lot of good memories back to me of being able to spend time together, and just being close in our faith together as a unit.
Gotcha. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm always fascinated by why people believe what they believe and what is it about that. And I've got respect for all people of faith, and regardless of faith tradition. I remember when I was at Fort Hood, I was with a soldier, and he was a Wiccan, and there was a prayer circle going on, and so as a chaplain, we have to perform or provide. And so I took him to that prayer circle, not knowing what to expect. I admit I was ignorant to the Wiccan faith, and I still am, but so I went, and I was just on the outside looking in, and it was just a beautiful thing. And so I saw how that filled him. And again, I'm just fascinated by what it is that draws people to their spiritual center. So how often in times of struggle or distress are you relying on your faith?
I would like to say that I do it every time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to hear.
No, I want to, because I'm guilty too. I'm guilty too.
You know, I mean, I wish it was that easy. I wish it was just that easy, that's just the go-to. I think it's fair to say, probably like most people, I personally, I have a very strong independent streak. And so especially in times of a struggle, I tend to rely a little too much on that. Mm-hmm. Before it kicks me in the butt and I realize that it's not for me to handle. And that tends to be where I turn and say, okay, I'm being dumb right now.
Right.
I need to pray. I need to talk to someone. I need to bring my tribe in and let them help me. And obviously, is a core part and a leader of that tribe is my faith in God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I get it. I completely do. Yeah, I'd like to say that as a chaplain, that everything I do is spirit led and is driven by God, but it's not, right? And I have that constant battle as well. The tension between what I want to do and where God is telling me to go. And I've got this, not necessarily independent streak, but there's some rebellion in me. And I'm like, God, are you sure that? Because I really think over here, and invariably I make the wrong choice. So you talked about your tribe. Mm-hmm. What or who does your tribe consist of?
At the core, obviously, is God, but my tribe is my family. I have the greatest blessing as a husband who has just shown me love beyond measure. You know, I mean, you talk about a depth of care and compassion and forgiveness, and I just couldn't ask for. We always tease each other and we say that you're my human, and he 100% is my human. And so he definitely is right up there. My mom, my sisters, my kids. I've got 3 kids, so we're blended. So I've got 3 kids of my own. He's got 4. So together we're a Brady Bunch plus 1.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
no Alice.
No Alice. No, that would be really
gotta
nice.
Work on that.
Yeah.
Gotta work on that.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to him about that. Maybe for our anniversary.
Yeah.
But, you know, watching my kids, and I always tell my kids, being a parent is the hardest job. It does not come with a user's manual, and you fail more often than you are going to succeed. But I watch them, and I watch them growing into these young adults, and every single day I learn something about myself.
Right.
Good or bad, I learn something about myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a 22-year-old son, and my daughter will be 24 in just about a week or so. And I look at them and I say, God is gracious, because the people that they've turned into has nothing to do with me or my wife, because believe me, we've made our fair share of mistakes as well. And so it's really, I guess, humbling and awe-inspiring to see how suddenly they just make a transition at some point. And for all those out there that may be listening who are about ready to pull their hair out over their teenage kids or their young kids, hang in there.
Oh, yeah.
right? Hang in there.
Oh, yeah.
Because at some point that amygdala and that front prefrontal cortex will all start wiring together at the same time, and all of a sudden you're going to be looking like, wow, my kids are adults. How did that happen?
Yeah,
And
they can do it.
They can do it despite us.
They can do it.
Despite us. So it's pretty cool. So if you're out there, hang on.
Yeah.
It gets better. It gets better. But also be sure to soak in those moments with them, because it also gets better, but it goes fast.
It does.
And how old are your kids?
So my youngest will be 15 at the end of March. And then I've got she'll be 16 on the 20th of this month. And then I've got a 19-year-old that is in her first year at Coastal Carolina.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then I've got the twins that are 20. One's active duty in the Army, and one is here in Sumter with us.
Okay.
And then we've got older girls that are married with babies and raising their own families now in the Virginia area.
Wow.
So
that's neat.
Mm-hmm.
So you hit on something, and when you had mentioned your husband, your face lit up. But how do y'all stay strong and connected with each other? Give me a marriage lesson, would you?
Oh, goodness. A lot of humor.
Uh-huh.
A lot of humor. So he and I have both been through our own traumas with relationships. And he met me while I was coming out of my trauma. And it's funny, actually, we were kind of talking through some of it this morning, too, just how, he always said that I tried to run. And he was like, you're not running anywhere, and he, from the get-go, he showed me that he was standing firm by my side, and he was going to be there and help me through everything that I needed to get through, with patience, with grace, understanding, and always a hug. And I love you, and just that unconditional love and support, and just, I think the key for us is just our ability to communicate with each other without fear, and understanding that both of us, our feelings are 100% okay and valid and are safe with each other, and that it's not going to change our love for each other. And having that understanding makes it easy to move through things, because marriage is hard.
Might be even harder than raising kids sometimes.
Really. And you'd think that it wouldn't be so hard, because you get to pick this person. But,
right.
You get to pick this person, and you change together, and you grow together. And if you can't be open, if you can't communicate and share your fears and your discomforts and the things that you're not happy about, if you can't do that, you start breaking down, and you start hiding things,
right,
intentionally or unintentionally, and it just kind of perpetuates itself into this ugliness, and you can't do that. And so with us, we just don't have that. Sometimes it takes time,
sure,
to get to the point and think of the words that we want to use, but just being able to talk through everything. And he just gives the best hugs. He does. He gives the best hugs. So and a hug can heal all things. So
yeah,
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Except for when they get too tight and you're like, uh-oh.
What I do.
Yeah, what I do. So you talked about communication, how important that is. Do y'all set off an intentional time to do that when you're home? Do you have date nights? I mean, what do you do with your marriage to ensure that communication stays at the forefront?
So we are not as intentional as I wish we were about it, but we have this weird sixth sense with each other that we need to talk through things. And we about 2 years ago bought our dream home, and we've got about 3 acres, so it's just enough. And both of our favorite things to do is, hey, let's go for a walk. And whoever initiates that is usually the one that's got something to talk through. And so we go and we walk, and our house is on a pond, and we've got chickens and we've got ducks, and we walk and we talk, and we play around with the chickens and the ducks, or we go and watch the fish in the pond, or, go look at we're setting up a garden this year, so we'll go and kind of play around down there as we talk through things. But that's usually our key. Like, let's go talk. Let's go walk. And so we get to enjoy what we worked so hard for. And also it's a relaxing situation and not threatening where you're potentially, hey, let's go to the bedroom and have a talk, or, wherever that space might be for some people. We both enjoy just being out and looking at the life that we've built. And so it's easy. It makes it very easy to have sometimes those hard conversations.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So when you have to have a hard conversation, how do you start that? Because sometimes having that's the hardest part of having a hard conversation. Mm-hmm. So how do you cross that threshold and have that difficult conversation?
So he's much better at it than I am.
So what makes him good at it?
He's very good at easing into it. And it might be his background in law enforcement that he makes it easy for him to just kind of, this has been going on. And he just slowly eases into the conversation. For me, I tend to have a gazillion of the conversations in my head first to try to script it out on how I want it to go.
Yeah.
And maybe I just need to write that out, because once I get in the situation with him that I'm going to have the conversation, I forget every script that I wrote in my head, and whatever is happening just kind of vomits out and is not eloquent at all. And usually he's like, whoa, where did this come from? What is going on? And it's like, wow, I'm a trained communicator and I cannot do this.
Right.
So, that is definitely not my strength, but I tend to just get it out, and he is more of the ease into it.
Right.
Kind, yeah.
Okay. All right. And I want to revisit something. You had said that you had some relationship trauma, and I don't need to know details or anything. But how did you work through that relationship trauma?
So the first part was coming to the realization that it was not only becoming dangerous for me, but it was becoming dangerous for my children. And once I hit that realization, the mama bear came out. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized that it needed to stop and that we needed to go our separate ways. But part of working through all of that is, like I said, going back to my tribe. I sought mental health counseling.
Okay.
For myself and for my kids, as well as relying and leaning on my friends, leaning on my faith. And it was shocking as I started talking to some of my friends who I already thought I knew well, how many of them had been through similar things.
Yeah.
And so having their own experiences and saying, hey, you're going to be good. It's going to work out. You're going to have to go through some tough stuff first, but you're going to get there. And having them as examples. It's easy to sit back as an outsider and say, hey, you're going to be good. You're going to be good. But hearing it from people that have gone through it and are on the other side of it just makes it so much different. It makes it more tangible.
Sure.
And keeps you moving ahead in those moments that you just don't think you can.
And what's crazy is both my kids went through addiction issues, right? And when I finally had the bravery to realize, that this wasn't caused after I went through the guilt of what didn't I do as a parent? Where did I go wrong? That kind of stuff, and realize that free will exists. And when I would start talking to people and about what my struggle was as a parent with what my kids were going through, it's amazing how many other people would just be like, you know what? I went through the same thing. We're going through the same thing now. And that saying, misery loves company, I'm not a big fan of that misery part, but there's a lot of truth to it. Mm-hmm. And just to be able to know that I'm not alone in this situation was invaluable to me and my family. And to know that where I felt people would have condemnation, you're a chaplain, your wife's a teacher, you should be doing better. Once I got through some of that head trash, and was just able to talk about it, was really the start of healing for me. And and luckily they're doing great. But there was a lot of personal guilt and condemnation that came with that, and probably much same with you when you were in that relationship. That there was some self-doubt, some questioning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was very similar. It's, how did I get myself into this? I'm smart. I'm educated. I'm a professional. All of those things, I'm put together. Look at my family, look at everything that we've got, how did this happen? And, again, getting out of that negative self-talk and realizing that there's a lot of other people that have gone through the same thing, and they're not thinking that about you. They realize that we are all human, and that things can happen that, you just don't even realize, until you're in the thick of it. It's just like, oh my gosh, what in the world? How did I get here?
Yeah, and a lot of times it's a slow burn.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And there's warning signs, things happen, and you have a tendency to overlook. You have a tendency to sweep it under the rug, but all of a sudden, that slow burn turns into a house fire.
Yes.
And now you're in the middle of that house fire and that chaos, saying, "Oh my gosh, how do I get out?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I really thank you for. Well, before we go,
sure.
You had said that you sought behavioral health.
Yes.
How did that help? Did it help or didn't it? Or what would you have rather have seen different?
So it did help. It did help. And I'm a huge proponent of behavioral health. My kids have sought counseling as well. I've got my younger two are in counseling. And I can't say enough how important it is to get help and just having that person to talk to. And what I've had to help my kids understand is, because there are times that they're like, "Oh, I'm doing fine. I don't need to go." And I'm like, "You need to go. You need to go, even when you're fine, because you'll be surprised, number one, how many times you think you're fine and then you get in there and all of a sudden you stumble across something that maybe you didn't deal with before because you really weren't fine.
Right.
But it got dug up because now you're kind of mellow and chill. And it's like, oh, you know what? There was this one thing.
Yeah, and you're willing to confront it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so honestly, those were the times that I didn't want to go. And even my kids have said a few times, like the times that they didn't want to go, but they went. Those were times that they had kind of those epiphany, those light bulb moments of, oh, wow, I didn't even know this was going on, or wow, I think I finally I made a breakthrough. I figured something out. And so, yeah, the necessity for counseling and for mental health and the resources that are available to us in the military, honestly, I wish that they were used more.
Right.
And I wish, and I think it's getting better, but I still think that there's fear and stigma. But I really wish that more people would use the resources that they're given, and the free resources that are out there, because taking care of yourself, not just physically, but mentally, is half the battle.
Absolutely.
It's half the battle.
Yeah.
And, I went through some stuff with my middle daughter that, I thought, I'm good. Like mental health, I'm good. I'm a proponent of it. But boy, when we got real deep in those weeds, I realized that there were a lot of things I didn't know and didn't understand, and that I honestly had some prejudices about. And having gone through it now, I don't have those prejudices anymore. But I'm grateful for having gone through that with her as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I remember when I got back from my deployment, we were on the tail end of the war in Iraq. Is it a conflict war? What do we? I don't even know what we call it. But we were there with all the withdrawal of the troops, and we were in Iraq, and behavioral health resources had drawn out all the I was the last chaplain, and there was roughly about 1,400 people that I had pastoral care for. And so you can imagine I had a fairly large counseling load. And then when I got home, I said, I probably need some counseling. And it was then that I went to see the counselor that I realized as a chaplain, right? I'm always like, come see me, let's talk. But I didn't appreciate the amount of bravery it takes for someone until I decided to go to counseling. Because I sat in that parking lot, I'm like, I don't want to go into here. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. And it was probably the hardest step I had to take. And I got an appreciation for just, it's easy for me to say, come, if you need to talk, come see me. But it gave me an appreciation for those that had the bravery and the trust to be able to do that. And so for anyone that goes and gets counseling, I have a new appreciation for it because it's a difficult step. It's difficult. The first step's the hardest.
Right.
And so kudos to you and your kids for doing that. And it's funny, the last 2 episodes that we've had, a common theme's developing. And it's really not by design, is that everyone's been through some sort of counseling. And everyone has come out better because of it. And so I think there's a pattern developing, right? Like, you need help? I go get counseling. I feel better. I learn about myself. I have those aha moments. But again, it's that first step.
It is.
So I really thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And being transparent and answering my questions as we go along here. And so for those that may be struggling, that there's a whole host of resources, or maybe you're in a difficult relationship situation. It's okay to remove yourself from that,
right,
and seek health and well-being, because it may open the doors up to a husband who gives great hugs, and there's still hope. Just because you may feel broken now doesn't mean that you're broken for life. And so I think you've proven that. So thank you for sharing a little bit of your life with me. And for those that are listening to this podcast, so I thank you. And we're just blessed to have you be a part of our organization. I appreciate what you're doing with the state partnership program, and more so just the spirit that you bring to our organization. So thank you for being here, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.